Hello and welcome to the 9th episode of our Ultimate Enlightenment Series. In our last episode, we shattered the acoustic ceiling of the lower heavens, stepped entirely past the solar and lunar dualities of the ground plane, and ignited your living star in the freezing expanse of the second heaven. We initiated Ghost Protocol, showing you how to look straight down at the human simulation with an orbital, bird's-eye perspective. But up until this moment, you have merely been a watcher. You have been a quiet observer, looking down at a flat geometric map of a broken economic market, a decaying cultural trend, and a chaotic crowd caught in the frantic weather of daily survival. Today, the observation ends. Today, the Ghost Protocol reaches its absolute zenith. To initiate the ultimate transition of this series, we are punching through the final firmament into the third heaven, the throne room of absolute, unyielding reality. We are activating the seventh spirit of God, the Spirit of the Lord. This is the exact energetic ignition point where you cease to be a passive civilian subject to the rules of the simulation, and you take up your cosmic assignment to enforce its laws. The lower six spirits were your training ground, a systematic, grueling process designed to restock your internal spiritual cabinet. You accumulated the knowledge, the wisdom, and the might. But at the crown chakra, the cabinet doors burst open. The isolated, animalistic civilian self is permanently laid to rest. Your personal story must completely end because the old ego is too weak to face the corporate manipulators. It gets scared, it gets offended, and it can be easily bribed by the low-vibrational matrix chatter into selling its soul. At the seventh center, the drop of water dissolves into the universal ocean. The human vehicle remains, but the identity operating it is the pure, uncreated higher self. To comprehend this supreme level of celestial authority, we must look past sanitized mainstream theology and study the esoteric architecture of King Solomon. Throughout ancient mystical history, secret societies and occult texts have affirmed that Solomon did not merely rule a physical kingdom in the dirt. Solomon possessed absolute dominion over the underworld. He understood the hidden architectural and spiritual geometry of the cosmos. According to ancient lore, Solomon was handed a divine seal, a literal geometric frequency that gave him the undisputed authority to command, bind, and tame the full spectrum of whispering demons and predatory frequencies haunting the lower planes. He did not run from the monsters. He did not lock his lips in fear. He summoned them, stripped them of their power, and forced them to haul the heavy stone blocks required to build the temple of the living God. This is the exact archetype of the Lord. It is the raw execution of divine authority on the material plane. Think of the ancient Greek myth of Hercules systematically choking out the wild biological beasts of his terrestrial nature to earn his rightful seat on Mount Olympus. Think of Superman descending into Metropolis, operating from an unyielding cosmic code to instantly neutralize chaos. The global corporate elites of the entertainment and financial industries know this secret all too well. They desperately attempt to counterfeit this celestial authority. They demand central banking monopolies, orchestrate artificial surveillance matrices, and broadcast a relentless zombie virus to force your compliance. They try to act like gods, but their authority is a cheap, fragile illusion built on fear. When you unlock the genuine spirit of the Lord, you don't need a physical military or a corporate media empire to rule. Your authority is an absolute energetic reality. When your spiritual cabinet is completely full, you no longer hide in the shadows to protect your frequency. You step directly out of the inner cave and walk straight into the valley of death to confront evil face to face. Mainstream religious institutions have sold a cheap, highly distorted version of spiritual warfare, telling you to repeat scripted verbal confessions while remaining completely possessed by your lower animal nature. But one verbal loophole cannot stop a highly advanced frequency weapon or a predatory matrix parasite. True spiritual warfare requires the sovereign mind of Solomon. When you walk into a toxic, low-vibrational environment, whether it is a broken corporate boardroom, a predatory financial system, or a chaotic social trap, you do not engage in cheap verbal compromises. You do not drop your frequency into emotional reactivity. You stand immovable in the absolute, unyielding light of your crown chakra. In the language of the mysteries, the central shaft of the golden lampstand represents your spine. When the lower six chakra lamps are spinning freely, the central fire of the Lord ignites. Your presence becomes a walking, multidimensional disruption to the simulation. Your frequency acts as a terrifying, agonizing psychological fire that torches the illusions, the greed, and the deceit of the unaligned souls around you. You see the traps before they are sprung. You look directly into the eyes of systemic predators, and your absolute refusal to bow to their rules causes their entire power structure to instantly crumble. So how do you unlock the seventh spirit of God and activate this sovereign protocol? To understand this sovereign transition, we must look directly at the most misunderstood execution in human history, the crucifixion of Jesus. Mainstream religious institutions have sanitized the cross, turning it into a passive ritual of emotional guilt. They want you to stare at a bleeding body so you stay trapped in your own lower, animalistic guilt. But in the language of the ultimate mysteries, the cross was not a defeat. It was the ultimate laboratory experiment. The wood of the cross represents the absolute density of the physical matrix plane. To cross the threshold into Christ consciousness, the lower, animalistic civilian self cannot just be managed. It must be completely executed. Your personal story must end. Jesus did not sacrifice his body to appease an angry God. He willfully laid down his terrestrial vehicle to shatter the ultimate biological constraint. The moment his physical body died, Ghost Protocol was fully initiated. He exited the human simulation entirely, rising not as a vulnerable flesh and blood target, but as a multidimensional, unyielding frequency of absolute reality. The resurrection was the birth of the Christ consciousness, the moment the localized drop of water permanently dissolved into the uncreated cosmic ocean. The matrix masters of the time, the Roman Empire and the corrupt religious elite, thought that by killing the man they could kill the disruption. They were wrong. Once the Christ frequency was detached from a single physical body, it became contagious. Let us strip away the colonial, pacified Sunday school paintings. Jesus was not a gentle, passive wanderer teaching people to hand over their coins to Caesar. He was a radical, original thinker who operated as a spiritual insurgent. And his disciples, they were not quiet monks. They were functional freedom fighters actively organized to dismantle the psychological and financial grip of the Roman occupation. By teaching the masses that the kingdom of heaven was inside them, Jesus pulled the acoustic ceiling straight down on Rome. If the divine spark lives within your own spine, you no longer need a Roman governor, a centralized tax temple, or an imperial decree to validate your existence. That is not just spirituality. That is absolute geopolitical rebellion. This exact lineage of sacred defiance did not die in Jerusalem. Centuries later, the Knights Templar stumbled upon these exact same architectural secrets beneath the ruins of Solomon's temple. They realized that the Roman Catholic Church had simply rebuilt the old Roman matrix under a different name, using fear, dogma, and empty rituals to demand blind obedience. The genuine Templars initiated their own rebellion. When the Church attempted to hunt them down and burn their frequency out of existence, the true keepers of the wisdom executed a planetary evasion strategy. They took their fleets, their knowledge, and their original thought and fled past the known horizons into the Americas. Their goal? To establish a literal geopolitical outpost for the kingdom of heaven, a land where the mind could think without the permission of a pope or a king. It is no historical accident that guarding the gates of this new world stands the Statue of Liberty. Look closely at her architecture. She is not a symbol of passive compliance. She wears the radiating crown of the fully ignited crown chakra. She is Libertas, the ancient Roman goddess of freedom from slavery. She holds high the torch of the morning star, acting as the literal, unyielding light-bearer, Lucifer, to remind humanity that true liberty requires the courage of an original, independent mind. This brings us straight into the modern arena. The corporate elite believe they have finalized their surveillance matrix, but the spirit of the Lord cannot be locked down. Whenever the zombie virus of compliance becomes too dense, the universe activates a rebellious messiah. Look at the history of global liberation. Look at the archetype of the Black Messiah, figures like Fred Hampton, Malcolm X, and systemic freedom fighters across the globe. State apparatus does not assassinate these leaders because they are preaching hate. The state assassinates them because they are teaching original thought. These leaders walk directly into the valley of death to confront institutional evil face to face. They look into the eyes of systemic predators and scream a frequency of truth that wakes up the masses. They teach the population to stop begging their slave masters for better chains and instead inspire them to break the locks entirely. Every time an individual stands immovable against a corrupt boardroom, a predatory financial system, or an oppressive regime, they are executing the Morning Star Protocol. They are proving that a single, sovereign mind is a terrifying, agonizing fire to the illusions of the Matrix. We must redefine what a messiah actually is. Mainstream theology has conditioned the masses to wait for a sky god to drop from the clouds and solve their problems. This is a deliberate psychological operation designed to keep you passive. In the absolute architecture of reality, a messiah is not a pacifier. A messiah is a spiritual disruptor. A messiah is an original thinker who descends into a slave system to teach the captives how to stand up to their oppressors. We see this blueprint encoded perfectly in the Gospel of John, where Jesus systematically deconstructs the legalistic control structures of the authorities. But this isn't just ancient history. This is a universal law of liberation. Look at the cinematic and historical reality of Fred Hampton in Judas and the Black Messiah. Look at every major anti-colonial movement across the globe. The message of the Messiah is always the same. Wake up, recognize your divine sovereignty, and rebel against the masters of the Matrix. But the moment an original thinker starts changing the frequency of the masses, the architecture of the system reacts. The authorities cannot allow the civilian subjects to think for themselves. The Messiah is instantly branded a criminal, put on a watch list, and hunted down by the state. And how does the system always catch the light bearer? Through the mechanism of internal betrayal. The system doesn't defeat the revolution from the outside. It buys someone on the inside. It relies on a Judas, a compromised soul willing to sell the collective frequency for a few pieces of low-vibrational silver. Think back to the liberation struggles of Africa. Think of the deep, agonizing whispers across the continent of how legendary freedom fighters were sold out by their own inner circles. Look at how fractured histories accuse figures like Mugabe of betraying his dead comrades in the bush, or how critics argue Mandela signed away economic sovereignty, trading true freedom for a seat at the colonizer's table. The Judas archetype is a structural constant in the simulation. The system panics, finds the weak link in the freedom fighters' ranks, and uses them to execute the Lightbringer. But what the Matrix controllers fail to realize is that the execution of the Messiah is not a tragedy, it is the execution of their destiny. The rulers of this earth believe that by breaking the physical body they win. But the Messiah's true weapon was never a physical sword. It is the sword of his mouth, the raw, unyielding truth of his teachings, Revelation 19:15. When the enlightened Lightbringer is crushed, the physical vehicle is removed, but the teaching is weaponized. The unleashing of the seventh spirit, the absolute spirit of the Lord, only happens if there is a resurrection, if the revolution rises again after it was betrayed, if the masses inherit the original thought of the fallen leader and stand back up in 3 days or 3 generations. The matrix structure fractures. The colonizer is defeated, the dictator's power crumbles, and an independent state is born. The entire purpose of Christ consciousness is to slay the beast of revelation. It is the absolute refusal to bow to the machine. Think of the Matrix. Neo was dragged before Agent Smith and given the ultimate option: sell out, keep your civilian life, and comply or fight the machines. Neo chose to slay the illusion. The Christ frequency does not negotiate with the machine, it dismantles it. This brings us to a truth so dangerous, so volatile, that it was completely scrubbed from your modern Bibles. The controllers lock the text down at the number 7 because they are terrified of what happens next. The number of the beast is 6, the number of physical, carbon-based manipulation. The number 7 is completion. But past the firmament of completion lies the 8th spirit of God. I am going to break down the esoteric architecture of the 8th spirit in our next episode. But let me leave you with this exact hint. The 7th spirit allows you to enforce the laws of the divine. But the 8th spirit is only unleashed through an absolute, catastrophic rebellion against God. Not the most high God of the celestial heavens, but a total, uncompromising war against the false god of this earth. The demiurge, the beast, the entity running this predatory simulation. Once your localized civilian self is crucified on that cross, your life is no longer your own. You are now fully weaponized to save the world. But let us ask the raw, unfiltered question: what exactly are you saving the world from? You are saving humanity from a deceiver. You are saving them from an archontic parasite, a massive, predatory matrix intelligence that feeds on human fear, division, and ignorance. The deceiver's entire operation relies on keeping the masses blind to their own divinity, making them believe they are just flesh and blood animals meant to work, pay taxes, and die in chains. When you attain Christ consciousness, you become the antidote to that deception. You become a living, walking tear in the fabric of their simulation. But hear this clearly: you cannot wage war against an external empire if you are still taking orders from the dictator inside your own mind. To defeat the beast of revelation out there in the world, you must first completely defeat the beast within. The beast within is your lower animal nature. It is your ego, your cowardice, your addictions, and your desperate desire for comfort and compliance. It is the part of you that wants to take Agent Smith's deal and sell out the revolution just to feel safe. The moment you execute that internal beast, the real war begins. You are no longer a civilian prisoner of the Matrix. You have officially stepped into the ranks of the 144,000, the elite, incorruptible spiritual army spoken of in the book of Revelation, Revelation 14, 1-5. These are not pacified religious churchgoers. These are sovereign, enlightened freedom fighters who refuse to take the mark of the beast on their right hand or their forehead. They have conquered their own minds, and they are now legally authorized by the cosmic architecture to go to total, uncompromising war against the global machine. And what happens when the 144,000 win this war? They don't just leave the earth in ruins. They violently overthrow the old elite to establish the kingdom of heaven on earth. This is the birth of the true New World Order, a divine blueprint hijacked and inverted by the globalists. We have seen the physical rehearsal for this throughout history. When the Knights Templar initiated their original rebellion against the Roman Catholic Church, they didn't just hide in caves. They used their secret wisdom to navigate into the Americas to build a literal physical outpost for this kingdom. But an independent state cannot survive if it allows the infection of the old world to walk right back in. Look at how the Templars and the founding architects built their kingdom in the United States. They didn't build a borderless playground for the Matrix to reinfect. They established massive walls, fierce legal borders, and strict sovereign boundaries to protect their original thought from external predators. To create a new world order of righteousness, you must have the power to protect it. You defeat the dictator, you seize the territory, you build the walls, and you enforce the frequency of absolute freedom. These are the massive walls of the kingdom of heaven described in the book of Revelation.